Hey guys, it's Danny. Yep, it is very early morning. I woke up super early, so maybe I can avoid the noises of the construction that's going on next to my house. So yeah, that's why everything is so dark right now. But don't worry, I have studio lights. Today we are actually going to talk about some orchids that, let's say, weren't necessarily in the best condition, or they were seedlings, or they were just very different than how they look now. We're gonna do a then and now type of video. I don't remember what number this is, but I'll be sure to link you in the description the previous then and nows that I did, and also more videos on these orchids and how they used to look like. Alright, so with that said, don't forget to give this video a like if you end up enjoying it, and why not subscribe? I post 3 times a week. And with that said, let's start with one of the most dramatic orchids I'm gonna show you today. And here she is. You might actually not even recognize this one, and maybe some of you don't even know the story because this orchid was purchased almost 2 years ago at this point. This is a Cattleya orchid coming from Orchid Garden, the Hsiang Yu Gold Coast, which is a miniature Cattleya orchid with beautiful orange and yellow flowers. And as you can see, she is almost ready to bloom, which is super exciting. I have wanted this orchid or something similar to it for many years. And when I purchased it, I was super disappointed because it arrived in one of the poorest states in which an orchid ever arrived to me. It was sadly packed wet, so many of the leaves decided to just rot on transport, which is what usually happens when plants generally are packed dry, and on transport, maybe high temperatures or low temperatures, like it was in my case, affect the orchids inside. And well, can you believe it? She made a full recovery. In the back, you can see the leafless canes. Joey Bird, do you want to assist me? This is Joey, and she's not as good as flying as Maya is, and the lack of light doesn't actually help. Come on, you can chill on the table. So yeah, you can still see some leafless canes in the back. This one never actually bloomed for me, but ever since I purchased it, it grew super well. It is such a vigorous orchid, in my opinion. And somebody's taking a bath at 6:30 in the morning. What you doing? Taking a shower? Well, I guess you need to be clean. Alright, too many distractions. I need to hurry because the noises have kind of already started. So you can see some leafless canes here in the back. But overall, this orchid now has more leaves than it doesn't. It is fully recovered, but the thing that I need to do is give it a good repot, of course. We're approaching 2 years in this pot, and I will actually remove this older part because it doesn't look so good, it doesn't serve any purpose anymore. I will only keep this part of the plant. I actually have 2 divisions, if you can see. So I will remove the older parts and make sure to straighten the part of the orchid which is new. But I will do this after the blooms are done because it's not long now. I'm pretty sure in about 2 weeks I can go ahead and repot it. Anyway, I'm really happy with the evolution. And in this case, this orchid looked much worse than it looks now. Next up, here we have Phalaenopsis bellina, and this orchid actually went through a lot. It's a pretty old orchid in my collection, and initially it looked very well. Very similar to how it actually looks now, so nothing much changed. Oh no, it did. Because this orchid at some point, due to the spider mite infestation that I had, managed to acquire what I believe to be the Orchid Fleck virus, which is a virus that produces discolorations on the leaves, corrosive spots, and this orchid used to look at some point so bad that I was considering a replacement. I actually believed it will not make it in the end. But the thing with viruses is, even though there is no treatment for them, the immune system of a plant can actually fight them off. So I just hoped that with offering good care and culture, I can set up the best conditions that I can for the orchid to actually fight off the virus on its own. And guess what? I think it did, because this is the first year where I don't actually see the chlorosis spots. You can see older leaves in the back here, how bad they still look. But the newest leaves that were produced in the past year and a half, I would say, look super good. So I'm ready to declare this orchid, I'm not sure if cured, but she is handling the virus super well. By the way, the virus didn't spread. I'm always taking care that I don't have spider mites in my collection, and I don't, so that's great. And as you can see, she's still in bloom, but being that she's a summer bloomer and it's kind of getting cold now. She will soon stop flowering. One of the buds is yellowing. I do, however, have a new warmer setup for my summer bloomers, which I will show you in a different video, so maybe I can actually prolong a little bit the flowering. I don't know. I'm testing some stuff out and I'll tell you about it. But yeah, now it's a little bit too cold for it. However, though, I do believe my bellina is a-okay right now, so I'm super happy about it. Next up, here we have the Paraphalaenopsis labukensis, which now I'm forced to put on top of various things to be able to display its full length, and still it doesn't really fit in the frame. So she is super long right now, and the reason for showing you this one is to see how much it grew in about 2 years, because this was a seedling when I purchased it, and when I say seedling, I mean seedling. So you will see some images on the screen right now. It actually looked more like a Neophonetia, and yeah, it was the size of a Neophonetia. And now look at it. It is about 40 centimeters long, at least the longest leaf, and it's not yet fully mature. It is fastly, is that a word, approaching maturity, and I'm very hopeful that next year I'm gonna have a bloom. But this is one of those orchids that just grew super fast. I mean, from seedling to mature size in 2 years, it's fast in orchid terms, unless you're dealing with a Tolumnia. And being that I did try out various setups with her, and she was not sit back, says something about the vigorousness of this orchid. And yes, literally, there was no setback ever on this orchid. The leaves grew larger and larger. It's not a very fast grower, definitely. I think I got 4 or 5 new leaves ever since I purchased it. Definitely not fast growing. You can see the older leaves, they do have some damage. I had some thrips or spider mites at some point, which I took care of. The new leaf looks absolutely beautiful, but I will have to say it is super rewarding when you have an orchid starting off as a tiny seedling and then it grows before your eyes pretty much. I will be super happy when I will see the flowers, but so far I'm very happy with this orchid. If you think you will enjoy it, definitely go for it. I find it a very vigorous species and easy to care for. I just tend to give it a little bit more light than a normal Phalaenopsis, and other than that, I really just treat it like a Phalaenopsis. Next up, here we have quite an impressive orchid, and if I show you how it used to look like, it's even more impressive. This is Dendrobium Blue Happiness, which I acquired, I think about 3 years ago at this point, from IKEA, and it was a mess. It did not have any roots. The orchid was quite dehydrated, if I remember correctly. It did not look good. You'll see images on the screen. I do also have a video on the repotting and saving process. So we started with, I think, 1 or 2 very dehydrated pseudobulbs, no roots whatsoever, and look at him today. Multiple growths with multiple flower spikes. This one has 2 flower spikes. I also have older canes still blooming. And I also have a pretty old part of the orchid, which at the next repotting I will remove because it serves no purpose anymore. It is pretty dry, it doesn't look so good, but you can see it actually grew very fast from the state it was in into a blooming plant. It actually bloomed within its first year in the blooming season, or better said, when the canes mature. So these orchids currently reside outside. They love the heat, they hate the cold. So I just brought them in the greenhouse, and you've seen them at the beginning of the video most probably. One of the easiest orchids to grow and one of the most resilient orchids are the Dendrobium Phalaenopsis. Of all dendrobiums that I've ever had, I find these guys to be the easiest and most rewarding to grow. They're just like Cattleyas. They can do with a little bit less light than Cattleyas, but they flourish and they bloom like this the more light you give them. These are the orchids that can tolerate sun the best in my collection. Not that I am encouraging you to place your Dendrobium Phalaenopsis in the sun. They can definitely get sunburned, but with proper adjustment, they can tolerate quite a great deal of sun. I was impressed. And since they don't take dormancies, they're green pretty much all the time, well, the older canes will lose their leaves at some point with age, and the bloom show can be quite spectacular, as you can see. On a personal note, I am looking to expand my Denphal collection, but these guys are not super common in my area. Yeah, they're very common in flower shops, but there's a finite number of hybrids which keep repeating themselves. So I'm looking for the Asian imports more. So we're gonna see what we find. But yeah, really happy with the spectacular evolution of this orchid. Now, even though the goal of orchid growing is to make your orchids look better than they used to, sometimes this actually doesn't happen for various reasons, but it's important to talk about them so we see where everything went wrong. So here is my cat, and the birds are making fun of me. So this is my Cattleya Hawaiian Splash Lea. It is the oldest Cattleya in my collection, 7 years old, over 7 years old at this point, and when I purchased it, it looked spectacular. And not only that, it grew very fast, it bloomed multiple times a year, the bloom show was better, and something happened along the way. This is what remains of it. I actually divided it many times to share it with some friends. Back then I was okay with dividing. I wasn't really sure how fast orchids would grow, so I was like, oh, you want a division? Sure, I'm gonna chop up my orchid. Yeah, I deserved that. So I reduced the size of this orchid dramatically, but that's not the worst thing that happened to it. Being that it's the oldest orchid in my collection, she has seen everything, including me moving to a different country, not having medium, going through fusarium, and she actually does have fusarium. And I was kind of hoping she would pull through it and fight it on its own, but I don't know if that's the case, because ever since the fusarium outbreak, this orchid has been growing so slow, and the bloom show is not particularly great. This is not the best she can put on. This is her summer flowers, which are always less colorful. But from a cluster of 5 flowers, I now have 2. Recently repotted it, but it does have a good root system. I'm not stressing it out. I'm not actively doing anything to set it back, but it's reluctant to put out multiple growths and just be as nice as the other Cattleyas. And she didn't used to be like that. So the only thing that I can attribute this to is fusarium. I'm afraid this orchid might actually never be super vigorous again. I'm still holding on to it because I love it, but after so many years of seeing this decline, I'm very tempted to buy myself a replacement. I had the opportunity with Orchids Deluxe and I said, no, I'm not gonna get one now. This is not a super common orchid, so maybe I should have jumped at the opportunity. I don't know, but yeah, this is an example of things just going wrong along the years, which is not frequent. I don't have many orchids that are doing worse now than they used to, but all of the ones that I have, which are 3 at this point, is the Monte Elegante, Leopoldi, and this one that I can think of the top of my head, which are doing worse now. All of these are the older orchids which went through the move in the fusarium outbreak. So they do have this in common, and I am looking into replacing all of them because I do believe they have an issue which I don't think I can resolve. So yeah, Sally, this can happen as well. Luckily, it's not frequent, and if you don't do the mistakes that I did with sharing the water and everything, you should be pretty safe, even from fusarium. Next up, let's look at another kitty. About 2 years ago, I made a shredder orchid, my last shredder orchid, because they have decided not to ship to my location anymore. Anyway, so this beautiful Cattleya, which I'm just gonna show you the tag, because I'm pretty sure I will mispronounce it. This one had a serious case of rotting pseudobulbs. Very soon after I purchased it, pretty much all of its pseudobulbs died off, and I saved a new growth. So I do encourage you to see that video. I always say this. It's a very interesting case. I'm really happy that I caught it on camera and it was successful. So I managed to save only the new growth, which had some of the older rhizome with roots. Other than that, no pseudobulbs. And look at her today, 2 years later. Very impressive, right? Not so much, but it's okay. Considering what she's been through, it's impressive. She is still thriving. The root system is growing, and even though it's gonna probably take a lot of time for this orchid to fully recover, she will survive. She's recovering. I have a new growth that I see from the latest pseudobulbs, so I am hopeful. But think about division and the fact that we always kind of leave about 3 pseudobulbs for orchids to continue growth with the same speed. This one had none. It had an immature growth, luckily with some roots on the older part of the rhizome that I saved. I cut away the pseudobulbs, kept the rhizome and the new growth. That's all it had. So it is quite impressive to me that it actually managed to survive with an immature new growth, which I do believe is this one in the back. Will it look the best for a while? No. Will it take a lot of time to recover? Yes. But it's still alive. So it's a great experience that I had. I'm really happy I had the opportunity to have it and to film it. Here's hoping for some bigger pseudobulbs though, because this is tiny. She's a big orchid, or she's supposed to be. And my birds are going mental right now. They're in that period where they love each other. Baby birds, it is time to be quiet. Just cuddle each other and love each other and do your nest things in silence. How about that? Probably they won't, but yeah, they're up to nest business right now. And the last orchid that I'm going to show you is my Gongora galeata that I received in a swap, I think 2 years ago at this point, maybe a little less than that. Well, this orchid, if you remember, arrived with some really weird spots on her pseudobulbs and leaves. And well, these things never actually completely went away, and the orchid took about an eternity to do something. It grew roots though, and well, finally it matured some pseudobulbs. It's putting on some new growth and some flowers, which I will give you a better look at the end of the month, and I'll talk about the fragrance and all of that. But there she is in bloom. I'm so happy because I really wanted this orchid. It's supposed to smell like orange. Does it? I don't know. We're gonna find out at the end of the month. Spoilers. But yeah, this is one of those cases that took its sweet time, and it's not the only case that I had. There are orchids which just don't really do much for a year or so until they figure out where they are and how the environment is and how to best approach the situation, I guess. But then after a year, they just start to grow like nothing ever happened. Like, okay, I'm done with just sulking for no good reason. I'm gonna grow now, and I'm also going to bloom. And hey, I'm not complaining, but just so you know, just because an orchid doesn't really do anything for a year doesn't necessarily mean it will die. Sometimes it will, but sometimes it won't. And the Gongora galeata, luckily, was one of the happy cases. And I have to say, I love it. I love the flowers. I do want to have more Gongoras in my collection, and I do really like how it performs in the orchid top pots, because the flower spikes can actually lean through these little pins and just become pendant and beautiful along the actual pot. So yeah, this was the last orchid for today. She is doing great, happy to report. And I do believe it's time to end because I can hear noises intensifying outside. Alright, so the lights came on in the greenhouse. It means it's 7. So it's time to end the video. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to check the description for additional videos on these orchids and the other then and now type of videos that I did along the years. So with that said, thank you for hanging out with me, and I hope you have a great day. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid videos, tutorials, experiments, updates, and other fun orchid subjects. If you wish to support the channel, do consider becoming a member or visit the merch store linked down below in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's always nice to stay in touch there as well. And I'll see you all next time. Bye!